We're coming up with a lot more movies now. So much so that it's actually overwhelming. We have so many new releases this year. Remember the pandemic and we're like, oh shit, I think, how many movies came out this year? 5? Don't you miss those days?
I mean, kind of, because it was easier to compile best of end of year lists for a show. We just had a handful of movies to choose from. And thankfully, from that small handful, there was still actually some good fight scenes. But now, I mean, according to my calculations of the movies I watched, I have 42. I didn't realize I watched that many just strictly movies that had fight scenes. You know, they may not have been strictly action movies or even martial arts movies, but there was some sort of physical altercation. So I'm counting them as 42 movies that I watched this year that had a fight.
Yeah, for the sake of this conversation, because it's not just a rehash entirely of all the movies we talked about this year. It's like, well, if it had decent action in it, might as well cover it. Might as well talk about it. My category is a little bit different from yours. Mine a lot more tongue-in-cheek, but I still had my own thoughts about, like... But actually, like, as I was making up my own categories and going through all the movies, I realized, I'm like, wow, I actually had more positives than negatives. And don't get me wrong, there are some negatives here. But like, you know, I was genuinely surprised that, like, I mean, if things are like this, it's kind of on the up and up, I think, I would say. But yeah, I mean, 2024 was pretty good for the most part, right? For the most part,
yes. I think we can overall say it was a pretty good year for action fans, for fight fans, because, hey, this is our end of year review where we discuss the best, worst, disappointing, and then all the random categories you're going to be throwing at me. And this is going to be a nightmare to edit, maybe because of that. But yeah,
I'll try my best.
Yeah, we're talking about our favorite, maybe not favorite, a lot along with user comments for fight scenes in 2024. So this comprises of anything that was released, where you could rent, you could buy, you could watch in theaters in the US, or that was easily accessible in the year 2024. Because what happens sometimes is movies come out earlier in maybe another country, but we don't get it here until this year. But I made sure not to count anything that was in festivals that didn't come out this year, that will most likely come out next year on like streaming services. So there is like one particular movie I would have loved to talk about, but it's not on this list. So 2024 is, you know, mainly anything US related.
Yeah, and we have to cover those movies when they're topical and people can actually watch them.
Yeah, 来たね、宮崎。私は初めてあなたのサクッと終わらせてゆっくり観光しよう。
Yeah, no, this was an interesting year because we got lots of surprises, like you mentioned. And so I wanted to start off with my honorable mentions category. This category for me this year is actually to kind of highlight maybe some performers or some movies that some people probably aren't going to watch because they're, you know, smaller budget, or they maybe don't look as enticing as some of the bigger ones. So I wanted to call them out. Or maybe they are some bigger names, but, you know, they just didn't make it into those elevated categories for me. So 2 movies I wanted to point out were Jade and Dead Hand. We covered those in our Quick Jab episodes. In the movie Jade, the performer Shayna West, she does pretty amazing work there considering the small budget. And when you see her fight scenes, you can see that she's incredibly capable of doing fight choreography. It gets a little shoddy towards the end, but that's okay. It's a lower budget movie, so it's more forgiving. So I got excited when I saw her in The Killer's Game, but she's incredibly underutilized in that movie. So I wanted to point out that this is oddly enough the better usage of her abilities, and I hope that she kind of gets cast in something better. And then from that, Dead Hand is a really, really small indie martial arts movie made by John Francis McCullough, the director, also one of the stars. It's like one of those movies where you can easily see people giving negative reviews because like, oh, it's so low budget. They didn't have this, intricate story. You can see that they're not really that fleshed out with their acting ability yet. But when it comes to their martial arts fighting, you can see there's something there. It's a really, really good start. And I mentioned this a lot in our other episodes, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But like, I think that it would be interesting to see that they continue their career and like see where they started, and hopefully that they continue to evolve with what they're doing with fight choreography.
I was interested in that, but then I guess I kind of forgot about it ever since. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I had my own category of movies that I've been meaning to watch and I never did. Another movies I wanted to watch were Take Cover, only because Scott Adkins is in it, and I think this year is a slightly slower year for him. Because I feel like every year he has like 2 or 3 movies, and this year he doesn't show up nearly as much in my radar. So Take Cover was one, and then the next one was Kung Fu Games.
We need to figure out how to get out of here. 4. If we want to survive, 3, 2. We need to fight together. 1.
I saw the trailer. I thought that's really an interesting premise. Does it hold up to its? I don't know if it holds up to its premise. So
I watched it, actually. We never covered it. So we watch a lot of movies, and we can't cover all of them. Yeah. I did watch Kung Fu Games. For its budget, I think it's commendable. It's not the best. There's a fun homage to, was it 5 Elements Ninjas in there? It's pretty obvious in the trailers what they're referencing. I think there's one fight I liked in it where one of the main characters fights a bunch of ninjas and he's using glow stick nunchucks, so it's just a neat visual. But in terms of martial arts, it's low budget. It's not bad, but it's doomed to be forgettable by martial arts fans. That's kind of the problem with it. It's okay. I try to commend it for what it's trying to be. It's just a low budget martial arts movie.
All right. Is that all your honorable mentions?
No. So another honorable mention. So since you mentioned Scott Adkins, he did have another movie this year that we covered, One More Shot. And
that's right.
I like the movie. I like the concept and everything in that movie. I think it's really crazy how they just stitch together all these scenes to make it one, quote unquote, one shot. And that increases the difficulty with the fight scenes, because actually these fight scenes technically are one take, but they hide some of the edits, with pants and whatnot. But the fight scene on the tram, where Scott Adkins gets on the tram, he takes out a few guys with the guns, and he goes one-on-one with another fighter. I don't remember his name offhand right now, unfortunately. But apparently that was all real. Like, when we watched that, we speculated, is that green screen? Like, are they just, did they just board a train and then it's green screen? But no, they actually went from one location to another while they were doing this fight scene on a real moving train from the airport. So, yeah, that's in my honorable mentions. I like that fight a lot. It's short because of the one take nature of it. So I think they couldn't just make it more complicated with the choreography, but I like what they were able to do with it.
You know, right. One More Shot actually was on my list. I just like kind of just glazed over my head that like, yes, that's right. Scott Adkins was in that, and then realized, maybe that's why he didn't do too many movies this year. Because the production on that, probably, like those movies probably are a nightmare.
Probably took a lot out of it.
Exactly. It takes a lot out of you, and it's production wise, like it probably takes so much effort.
One More Shot is one of those movies that punches well above its weight class.
Yeah.
It's technically direct to video, but this, this feels like it has like millions more devoted to its budget because it's just so well made and it nails its execution. But yeah,
absolutely.
I was tottering on where to put One More Shot. It was like kind of in creative for me at times, and then it kind of got pushed out. I spent the entire day watching fight scenes, so I was like constantly moving things around. I mean, even when we got on this call, I was like still like moving things around.
You're like cramming for a test.
I mean, pretty much, yeah. I was trying to cram things in before
sure.
last minute. But yeah, unfortunately, One More Shot didn't make it. But my last honorable mention was Monkey Man. And it's interesting because when we watched this movie and when we reviewed it, we were actually pretty negative. And I went back and watched some of the fights on it, and they actually hold up a lot better in isolation. And when you think about the story too, about a guy who's like fighting his way up the food chain of him being this poor person and then like literally going against like the 1%, like it feels like much more relevant now, and it feels like it came out a little too soon. Like this probably would have fared a lot better if it came out after recent world events. One of the things I noticed though, Dev Patel, like yes, the camera work is a little too messy and a little too insane, but he's doing the work. I like how savage he is in the fight scenes. There's times when he's just biting people. Like he bites some guy's nose off in a fight scene. And then there's this really great elevator fight, lots of good knife work, where he's struggling with one of his opponents. He puts the knife into his opponent's neck and it doesn't go all the way in. So what he does, because his hands are like held, what he does is he bites on the knife and then like slowly
slides it in,
ekes it in. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. That's pretty unique.
Sure.
And then later on, he brings fireworks to a fight, and like I wish they utilized that more because that was a pretty cool visual and it was something very different. But it's just so short after that. Like there's lots of really cool ideas that I wish they expounded upon a little more. So that's why it just became honorable mention as opposed to going somewhere else. So with that said, I reached out to the internet. We have multiple ways where we keep in contact or interact with people who like martial arts movies. And I asked multiple social media sites, what were your favorite fights in 2024? And I got some user comments to talk about. Now, this is kind of interesting because these 4 films I'm going to talk about, they were nowhere on my list. So that's not to say I didn't like them. I liked aspects about them, and I'll talk about that. But I just thought it was funny that, the people that follow us or talk to us online, like they're like, oh, we like this, and we're like, oh, we don't agree with that. But so I'll start off the first one. I'm pretty positive you don't watch this. So Deadpool and Wolverine.
Ugh. I mean, yeah, I love that. Sorry, is my bias showing right now?
Yeah. So multiple people commented on this. Tylerston on YouTube, Alex Studio 7506 on YouTube, and then I Know Nothing 22 on Reddit. Listed this movie as their favorite fights. One noting that it was funny and the fighting was creative. I saw this movie actually in the theaters. I was very drunk, very intoxicated when watching it, and I had a blast with it. You know, it's very stupid, very lowbrow humor, very low-hanging fruit when it comes to some of these jokes. And, I laughed because I was intoxicated, and, I kind of like that 90s, I don't know, sarcastic humor that's from we don't have humor like that
Ryan
anymore.
Reynolds is in a nutshell.
Yeah, pretty much Ryan Reynolds type humor.
Get your spectral sock out, nerds. It's gonna get good.
But it was, it was entertaining. I wouldn't say it went anywhere on my list, but the movie was entertaining. But there were actually some decent fight scenes in there. I think the reason why they weren't anywhere on my list is because what they're doing is I don't want to say this too negatively. It is a little derivative because so one of the fights, it's Wolverine and Deadpool fighting in a car.
Yep, I've actually seen that.
Oh, you've seen that one?
Fight
Okay.
scene in isolation. Yeah,
right. Yeah, when you watch it, you're just like, oh, this is the Raid 2. This is Fight Against Evil 2. It's two people fighting in a car. They're using every aspect of the car, utilizing everything to make fight choreography from it. And if you're just a normal American Marvel movie fan and you don't watch martial arts movies like us, then you might see this and think, oh, this is pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's different.
Yeah.
So I can understand why people like this. I think it's decent for what it is, but personally, I'm didn't do anything for me. And then there's another fight scene where they do a one take where it's just the camera, trucking along. It's pretty much Old Boy, where it's everybody's fighting left to right in one solid take. And it's impressive because for the most part, it really is all the performers fighting on screen, doing lots of complicated choreography. But I don't know, I think it just doesn't do it for me because something about it feels a little too manufactured. A little too...
Hey, that's a Marvel movie.
It's a little too clean, yeah.
Yeah, hey, now you're understanding what I mean sometimes when I critique Marvel movies, and I feel like that this is too... It feels like it's... I mean, now we live in an age of AI, right? But even before then, it feels like some of these action scenes feel like they're right out of a textbook, and they feel like you just said, too clean, too mechanical. There's less artistry in my opinion. But
it's interesting because that goes against kind of my complaints against some modern fight scenes where the camera is just all over the place. When you watch the behind the scenes on that scene, it's literally just the camera slowly moving. It's probably on a timer because they want to make sure everything is perfectly composed because the camera is literally moving left to right. So it's like the opposite. We need something a little more lively and in the middle.
Yeah.
And they were, they might have been influenced by Old Boy with the one take. But it's not bad. If you look at it out of context and you look at the amount of effort that goes into it, it's commendable. But when I watch it as a whole, I'm just like, oh, I've seen better, but it's not to say it's bad.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think enough fourth wall breaking jokes is enough to sucker me into watching that movie, so I'm good.
You
cool.
I mean, you don't need to see it.
I'm very biased, so yeah, I fully admit it. Okay, all right. You have other...
Oh boy, yeah.
Other movies,
So the next one,
quite a few, I guess.
We also reviewed this. Boy Kills World.
Oh God! Who mentioned this movie? Who mentioned this movie? What was it? Bill Skarsgård? Did he comment?
He's commenting. Bill Skarsgård and Yaya, and they're like, "Oh, we love Boys Kills World. Talk about it." Yeah, we were pretty harsh on the movie. We didn't like it so much. We got Kevin Scott on Twitter said, "Might be unpopular, but the last fight in Boy Kills World was pretty awesome. If every Western film could treat their guest martial arts actors as well as the movie did for Yayan, the world would be a better place." And I agree with that sentiment. I agree with that last statement. If every Western film could treat their guest martial arts actor as well as they did Yan Yan, then of course it would be a better place. And they tried. I think they really tried to give Yayan like this big role in this movie, because when are you going to see this Southeast Asian brown-skinned man in this Hollywood movie like this? You know, like, what do they got to do? Well, they got to make him like a fucking shaman, of course.
Of course.
And then he's got to beat up the white people.
Yeah, the exotic Asian, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's fine. You know, like, I mean, that's, you know, like, he's in a Hollywood movie. I'll give him that. But yeah, personally, not the biggest fan of this movie. I mean, we did a whole thing on it, but if you, after rewatching it, they fucking love the orbiting camera. They just are constantly orbiting around these people. They went overboard with the drone shots. I feel like it adds intensity because this drone is flying in really fast, but I'm not sure if it actually works in some of this stuff. The whole thing looks like previs. It looks like unfocused previs, and a lot of the fights overstay their welcome, especially the one with Yayan at the end. It just goes on and on and on. Yeah,
towards the end of the movie, like at least the final fight, and I do recall this from our review, was that like we were generally, if we had to give it any praise, it would probably be the fight with Yayan, obviously. Yeah, but then this is the same. The best one. Yeah, for sure. But then this is the same movie where it kind of teases you with this idea that like, oh, he's gonna go into his like an old boy kind of fight scene. He's gonna go into this hallway, and then it's like everything's extreme close up, and you can't see him actually fight anyone. And then next thing you know, everyone's dead, and he's just miraculously on the other side. I forgot
about that one.
Right. I was like, oh god, like that's how I feel about the movie. I was like, why? A lot of the missed opportunities in that, and the action department. Actually, that movie easily goes into my more negative categories, but I'll save that for later. Yeah, definitely wasn't as big a fan of that. So I agree with you there.
Okay, so I'll be interested with this one then, because I think this one we were a little more positive on, at least with the last movie in the series. So the next one is the Roundup. Punishment. So we got Elias T7 on Twitter. He says the fight scenes in the Roundup when Don Lee shows his beautiful boxing skills. I agree with that.
Wait. If the sentence was just, I like the way that Ma Dong-seok was like, he showed off his boxing skills in the movie, then I would have stopped you and been like, no, I don't agree, because this is a big departure, or like big step down from the previous film, like by far.
No, I agree. So I rewatched all the fights because we got this comment, and it's interesting because you see, with the exception of the last fight, a lot of his fights are just really small encounters with like maybe 2 or 3 people. He does his boxing moves, and then that's it. I think we speculated because it's a COVID film, maybe there was something have to do with pulling back on the amount of fights they could do or something like that. But like, yeah, it seems like they just didn't have enough. Maybe they were just saving it all for the end. And then when you get to the end, it's not bad, but it's unfortunately the worst of the series. So
right. Well, we talked about it in our episode that like a lot of the production team is different, like all together, right? Like, yes, made COVID movies, one COVID being an issue there, but different action director also like didn't help it at all. So I mean, I've went back and watched some of the other ones. I didn't finish I went backwards, actually. I watched the second one, never watched the first one. So, still like the second one, actually.
Second one's great. I like the second one too.
Yeah, so I never watched the first one. And
first one's good.
Yeah, so I'm like wondering, like, what is it about this movie that's like, and I think it just comes down to different team, like all together.
Yeah, I think the action direction was just on a smaller scale. It feels like they didn't give him as much to do in this movie. Yeah. And that's just it. They kind of had to save it all for the end. There's fights with the other characters a little more in the middle, but the whole movie it's very, very story based. So there's sprinklings of Ma Dong-seok, doing his big boxing moves every now and then. But how sustainable is that for action fans? How much longer can he just keep on punching people like that without evolving his choreography? And I think that's the issue with this movie for me. It's starting to feel a little samey.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I remember him barely being in, like, not being in the movie, but his presence wasn't nearly as, like, pervasive as the other movies. He's like, he kind of shows up every once in a while, but it wasn't there all the time. What else is the internet saying, Zero?
Okay, last one with the user comments for now is I have a feeling where maybe I might know where this is for you. Twilight of the Warriors, Walled In. So we got Mookie V from Reddit saying, posting, he liked when Raymond Lamb gets ambushed. There's a fight within the walled city where there's like lots of chaos and multiple people are fighting. I watched it. It was just okay for me. And then Mr. Blue Lou Boyle on Twitter says, the entire movie Twilight of the Warriors has my favorite fight scenes this year. So this movie is like kind of messy for me. Yeah. And when I rewatched the fights, I just noticed that there's just a lot of editing. There's just a lot of editing. It's like almost on every hit. And when we did the episode and I did my research into it, you found out that a lot of the actors, unfortunately, didn't get a lot of time to do.
And they had like 1 month to prepare.
Yeah, they had like 1 month prep. And the only real noticeable martial artists are Philip Ng and Sammo Hung. Sammo Hung being older at this point. I mean, you got, was it Louis Koo? I mean, he's been in a lot of Hong Kong martial arts movies, but he's not necessarily known for fighting. So it's like, he's kind of questionable at this point. So when you have your other leads who don't have a lot of time, you got to go with the editing. Yep. And that's just what it is. When you watch it, like when you watch the fights, it's like, yes, they're fun, they're intense. Like Kenji Kanagaki's choreography, he adds lots of stunt falls, he adds lots of fun wire work, but for us, at least, you and I both noted that it was just okay. Like it didn't really stand out.
I don't hate it. It's just like I think there was just too much hyperbole that was being used, and that's actually just that's unfortunate because sometimes movies are just they get negative blowback just because of the press or the hype that they're given. So like this movie is definitely
they need that too. They need to create this hype in order for people to want to watch it. And then unfortunately our expectations were not met.
Yeah. So, but I mean, even kind of before that, I was like, okay, I'm actually really hoping that the movie's going to turn out well. And then people were like, yeah, it's going to be it's a return to form for Hong Kong cinema. And I was like, no, don't say that to me, because that's just going to make it's going to set the bar really high for me. And coming out of that, like, I think I got enjoyment out of it only because like there are moments where it's so bonkers, especially with oh my god, Philip Ng.
I love Philip Ng in this movie. Yeah,
exactly.
He's the selling point. I gotta say, so when I was rewatching it, and like he does all the best stuff because he has his Qigong power, so he's invincible. So people are trying to stab him, they're trying to just punch him and shoot him and do all this stuff, and he's invincible. There's this moment I completely forgot. He does a double German suplex on two of the characters, and I just thought, fucking love it. That's amazing. Like I haven't seen that before, so I gotta commend certain aspects of the movie, but when I think about fight scenes as a whole, when I think about choreography is really big for us. There's not a lot of memorable choreography that chains all the more fun and interesting moments together. So that's kind of why, in my mind, the movie's fighting just falls apart. Yeah,
I guess now that we're talking about Philip Ng, I mean, okay, sure, like let's bypass the fact that like not a lot of the other performers in the movies are martial arts experts and who are also in their prime, so they can't really keep up with Philip Ng. and the lack of preparation for a lot, whatever. Let's keep all that aside. I would say if I had to put this, like, create a category for laughably fun, this movie would easily be in there.
Yeah.
Because like that Phil Bing, man, like he is so absurd. Like everything you're seeing with him. But I would never say that this is good choreography or even good fight scene. Like it's not a good fight scene in my opinion, but it's hilarious.
We exactly said that in our review, pretty much. Like it's probably not going to be on any of our lists, but when we watched it in theaters, you know, we were having a good time with it. It's pretty entertaining.
Shit. All right, so is that the internet? Is that?
That's not the end of the internet. There are more comments that actually align with some of my other movies, but for now, since those are the ones that we don't agree with, you know, we'll stop there with that. So, Will, why don't you give me one of your weird, wacky categories?